All right, let's talk about a word that, let's be honest, can make you feel like you've walked into the wrong classroom: theory. It just sounds heavy, right? Academic, complicated, maybe a little intimidating. But what if it's not a wall to keep you out, but a key to unlock a totally new way of seeing everything? Today, we're going to break it down piece by piece and see how this one word can become an incredible tool for understanding our world. I mean, this joke from Jonathan Culler's book just says it all, doesn't it? It perfectly captures the reputation that theory has. The idea of it can seem so complex and out there that, yeah, being called a terrorist is actually a relief. But stick with me. We're going to demystify this thing, and I promise it's way more interesting than it is scary. Okay, first things first. When we're talking about theory, with a capital T, we don't mean a theory of something, like, say, the theory of relativity. It's not one single explanation. Instead, think of it more like an intellectual toolkit. It's this body of work from some really interesting thinkers, people like Michel Foucault and Jacques Derrida, who basically looked at the world and asked, wait a minute, why do we do things this way? Why do we think this is normal? Think about how we use the word theory in just everyday conversation. You might say, my theory is that my neighbor is stealing my newspaper. That's not really a theory. It's more of a hunch, a guess. But this kind of theory is different. It's a complex idea that goes way beyond the obvious. It's not about finding a simple answer. It's about building a whole new framework for thinking about a problem. And this, right here, is its primary mission. This is what theory does. It loves to find the things we all just accept as true, as natural, as just common sense. And it pokes at them. It asks, is that really true? Or is it just a story we've been telling ourselves for so long that we forgot it was a story? So to see how this actually works in practice, let's look at our first clue. And this one comes from the brilliant and kind of rebellious thinker, Michel Foucault. And he decided to take on one of the most natural concepts we can possibly think of: sex. And this was Foucault's bombshell question. You see, the common sense view, what Foucault called the repressive hypothesis, is the story we all know. It's the idea that for centuries, especially in the Victorian era, society's main goal was to shut down and silence our natural sexuality. But Foucault just completely flipped that on its head. He said, what if all that endless talk about sex, from doctors, priests, scientists, what if it wasn't repressing it? What if it was actually creating it as the central secret to who we are? And Foucault gives this amazing historical example. He points out that before the 19th century, the focus was all on forbidding certain sexual acts. Things like sodomy. Sodomy was something you did. But then in the 19th century, something really interesting happened. The focus shifted. It wasn't just about what you did anymore, it was about who you were. The homosexual was invented as a type of person, a species, whose entire being could be defined by this one part of their life. So here's the big, mind-bending takeaway from Foucault. Sex isn't this raw, natural force that society is constantly trying to keep in a box. No, he argues it's an effect. It's a concept that was produced by all these systems, medical, legal, religious, that were trying to analyze and control people. It became the secret key to our identity, an effect pretending to be a cause. Okay, you with me? Let's take that same method, that same impulse to question what seems natural, and apply it to something else we almost never think about: the difference between speaking and writing. And this brings us to our second clue, from the philosopher Jacques Derrida. So our common sense tells us that speech is the real deal, right? It's immediate, it's authentic, you're hearing my voice right now. Writing, well, that's just a copy, a stand-in. It's a supplement for when we can't be there to speak. But Derrida noticed something really funny. He saw that even the philosophers who argued that speech was superior were constantly relying on writing to fix speech's problems, to clarify things, to make up for misunderstandings. And this leads to this fascinating chain of logic. It's a total reversal of what we think we know. So step one, we assume writing is just a supplement to speech. But step two, we realize speech itself is kind of flawed. It needs help. Then, the twist: speech itself is a kind of supplement. A child uses words to make up for the fact that it can't just get what it wants. And this leads to the mind-blowing conclusion: the so-called original, in this case, speech, doesn't really come first. The idea of the original is actually an effect created by the chain of copies that are supposed to come after it. The copy creates the original. Wild, right? And that logic brings us to Derrida's most famous and probably most misunderstood quote. When he says this, he doesn't mean that the world is literally a book. What he means is that anytime we think we're getting to pure, unvarnished reality, what we actually find are just more signs, more interpretations, more layers of meaning, more text. We can never quite step outside of that web of meaning. Okay, so we've looked at how Foucault challenged the idea of the natural. We've seen how Derrida flipped the original and the copy. With these two major clues in our pocket, I think we're finally ready to pull back the curtain and get a really clear picture of what theory is. It turns out we can boil this whole big, scary concept down to 4 key characteristics. Just 4 things that, when you put them together, really define this powerful way of thinking. First, theory is interdisciplinary. Its ideas are so powerful they can't be contained in just one subject. They jump from philosophy to art history to political science. Second, it's analytical and speculative. It just loves to dig into the concepts we use every day without thinking, like sex or writing, and unpack what's really going on there. Third, as we've seen, it's a critique of common sense. It's always suspicious of what we take for granted. And finally, theory is reflexive. And that's really just a fancy way of saying it's thinking about thinking. It forces us to question the very categories we use to make sense of the world. All right, now that we have our toolkit, let's actually use it. Let's take this theoretical approach and apply it to a concept that feels really familiar but is actually super slippery: literature. This seems like it should be an easy question. We all kind of know what literature is, don't we? But if you really try to find that one special ingredient, that single property that a Shakespeare play, a poem, and a modern novel all have in common, but that your grocery list doesn't have, well, it gets really hard really fast. And Culler offers this absolutely brilliant analogy. He asks, what is a weed? I mean, botanically, there's no such thing as a weed. There's no scientific essence of weedness. A weed is just a plant growing where a gardener doesn't want it to grow. Its entire identity comes from context and attention. And maybe literature is exactly like a weed. Maybe it's not defined by some special quality inside of it, but by the way we as a culture decide to treat it. So the big idea here is that literarianness isn't actually a property of the language itself. It's a result of the special kind of attention we decide to give it. When we pick up a book we know is a poem, we read it differently. We look for metaphors, for ambiguity, for deeper meanings. It's that special attention that actually makes it literature. So, we've wrestled with the word, we've looked at some mind-bending examples, we've even put it to the test. So what's the big takeaway? After all this, what is the real value of engaging with theory? At the end of the day, a theory's greatest gift is that it's a powerful tool for critical thinking. It trains us to be a little bit suspicious of the things that seem obvious. It pushes us to ask how the categories we use to understand our lives came to be in the first place, and, who benefits from them. I mean, look at this. It's a kind of before and after picture of our own thinking. Theory takes these simple, common-sense ideas that sex is natural, that originals come first, that literature is special, and it reveals the complex, hidden machinery working behind them. It shakes up our certainties in the most useful way imaginable. And yeah, I get it. This can feel a little overwhelming because theory isn't something you can ever finish or master. It's this endless, sprawling conversation. There are always more questions. But that's not a bug. It's a feature. That's the whole point. Its unmasterable nature is exactly what keeps it so vital and so important. It's a permanent invitation to keep on thinking. Because in the end, theory doesn't hand you a nice, neat package of answers. Its real gift, its real power, is that it helps you ask better, sharper, more interesting questions about everything. It hands you the tools to investigate your own common sense. So the only thing left to think about is, what seemingly obvious truth are you going to question first?